Hey everybody, this is Mr. Storm, and this week we are discussing methods. Oh man, are you excited? I'm excited. I can barely contain my excitement right now. I am just jumping up and down because methods are super fun, and they actually are. I'm not being sarcastic. I know it might sound like I'm being sarcastic, but I'm really not being sarcastic. Methods are great, and methods allow us to control our program even more, right? With loops, we have an incredible amount of control over our program, but with methods, we have even more control, okay? So I'm going to show you what a method is. Ta-da! I'm done. That's a method. Okay. I get it. Yeah, I know. I need to be more specific. All right, so when we're creating a program in C Sharp and we're trying to, I don't know, make something happen, we need methods to make our code actually work, right? We have our namespace, we have our class, and we have methods. Methods are essentially a block of code or, subroutine or whatever it is you want to call it. But methods are a block of code that can be run at specific times. And methods can be called at specific times whenever they're needed. Methods can do one small thing. Methods can be things that we use all the time, like console is a method, right? Every time we write console, that is an actual method. Well, it's a class actually that we're accessing, but it's essentially the same thing. Um, that's a class. Console's a class. Readline is a method. All right, and that readline always needs those open and close parentheses behind it because methods have open and close parentheses behind the method declaration whenever they're being called. So let's do this. Let's do this simply. I'm going to show you how we would use this. So let's do. Okay, let's do it like this. Let's do console dot write line. And again, we have a class called console and a method called writeLine. It's a writeLine method. And in this method, I'm going to say, hello. Welcome to my program. And then I'm going to create another console.writeLine just by copying and pasting because I'm lazy. And inside of this, I'm going to say, please choose an adventure. Okay. And instead of a write line, I'm going to make this a write so that we can actually see it. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a string variable called choice. Oh, okay. And I'm going to set choice to equal, if I could type correctly, choice equals console.readLine. And I probably should give them an actual adventures. Okay. Let's do that. All right. Copy. Let's say we want to give them 3 different adventures. And let's say sci-fi, and let's say fantasy, and let's say action, right? And then their choice will be and I'm going to do this as a switch too, just because it's a little bit easier to verify their choice. So 1, 2, or oh, I did 3. I said 2 and I typed 3. What is going on in my brain today? And then here I'm going to tell them 1, 2, or 3. Okay. So we gave them a quick menu, right? and this menu is going to ask them to choose an adventure of some kind. So I'm going to create a switch based on the choice variable, right? And inside that switch, I'm going to have a case of 1, and that's going to, nope, I didn't do that. What did I do? Okay. And that's going to be something. And then I'm going to have case 2 and case 3, and those will be something as well. And we're going to talk about the something in just a minute. And then I want my default, obviously, because defaults are always needed. Okay. All right, so I have my switch, I have my menu, I have a switch. Now, what we've done before in the past when we were talking about switches, we actually put all the extra code inside of the case here, but that kind of gets complicated and it gets a little bit wonky. So what I want to do is I actually want to create a method for each one of these options. I want to create a fantasy method or a sci-fi method, a fantasy method, and an action method. And then whenever they choose the right option, it takes them to that specific method, right? So here's how we do it. All of this that we've written so far is inside the main method, right? And the main method is our main controller of the program. But it doesn't have to be the only method we use. We can actually create a new method outside of the main. And by outside of the main, I mean outside of these brackets here. This one on line 11 here, and this one on line 41. So I'm actually going to break out of that main method here, see? And I'm going to create a new method. I'm going to call this new method, I don't know, sci-fi. Now, there's a couple things that we want to pay attention to when we're creating a new method. First of all, let's look at these keywords up here. We have static, void, main, right? Now, there's also another keyword we're going to want to use in there. So I'm going to do public static void, and I'm going to call this sci-fi. Okay, now, what do these words mean? Well, first of all, public deals with the scope of this method, meaning, do I want this method to be accessible outside of this class, right? Or do I want this method or values of this method to be accessible outside of itself? And if the answer is yes, then yes, I will put in public. Now we can also have private methods, but honestly, we're only dealing with one single class here, so it doesn't really matter. Public methods are fine for right now. So a public method. Static method. All right. So what does a static method mean? Sorry, I I just lost my train of thought. My bad, my bad, my bad. All right. So static method is essentially just a method that doesn't it's not a reoccurring method or a method that needs to be accessed by a specific kind of thing. It's a higher level thing. That's an object-oriented programming thing. Just know you need the static keyword. We'll do that. All right. I'll just keep it simple. I'm not going to try to bog you down with a bunch of extra information. Just know you need static. Now this keyword here, void, this keyword is talking about the return value, right? The return value. Now, we're not going to deal with that until next week. Next week, we will talk about parameters for our method and return values and so on and so forth. This week, we're just going to build some simple methods. So our methods have no return values whatsoever, so we're going to create void methods. And then I have the name of the method, right? And we use a lot of the same naming conventions as when we create variables. And I always have this open and close parentheses at the end, right? That's what we're looking for. We want an open and close parentheses at the end. Now it's saying it wants a it's saying it wants a semicolon. It's just confused because it actually needs these brackets. Okay, now this right here is now a new method called sci-fi, whereas this is a main method, right? Okay, so now we have two different methods in our program. And for our sci-fi method, I'm going to say something like console.writeLine. This is sci-fi. Okay, now As of right now, we currently have no way of ever getting to the sci-fi method. Right now, we're stuck inside of the main method, right? So what we can do is we can call the sci-fi method by typing in the name of the method in the first case, right? Because number one is sci-fi, and so if we have this first case, we want to call the sci-fi method. And that's it, right? Basically, we're just saying, hey, I want to go to the sci-fi method now. And what happens then is we go to the sci-fi method, it comes down here, it runs this code, and then when it's done running that code, it reverts back to the program. So let's give it a shot and see what happens. And it's building, it's building, it's building. We wrote a lot of code before we built it, so. All right, so we have our little menu here. We have hello, welcome to my program. Please choose an adventure, sci-fi, fantasy, action, choice, 1, 2, or 3. I'm gonna hit 1 and hit enter. This is sci-fi, so we get our sci-fi method. That's what we're looking for. We've broken out of our main method and we've jumped into the sci-fi method, which is exactly what we want. Perfect. Now, it's gonna revert back to the main method once I hit enter, because the last thing in the sci-fi method is a read line. So it's going to jump back up into the sci-fi method. And what's right after that? Well, a break, which breaks us out of the switch, which takes us down to a console.readline, and then the program's over, right? Because this is the end of the main method. And once the main method is over, your program is finished. Okay, so let's hit enter. And we got to hit enter again, and the program's done. So this allows us more control over our program. We can section our program off into little tiny bits, and then we can write methods for each of those bits so that we can navigate through our program in, specific ways. This is really going to help us expand the scope of our programs. This is going to help us to create bigger, larger, more interesting, more interactive programs instead of, something that runs in a couple of seconds. Now let's create another method just so that we're aware of, just so we can practice how to do this. So I want to create public static void static void, and I'm going to make mine fantasy method. And again, we can name these whatever I want to write. But I'm actually going to create a fantasy method. And again, inside this, we can type whatever we want. We can make whatever we want. We can put a loop in here. We can build an array. We can do all kinds of stuff inside this method because this method is just like our main method. It just needs to be specifically called at some point in our program. So console.writeLine. This is fantasy. Is this just real life? Or is this fantasy? Console.readLine. Okay. Now, as you can see, they look exactly the same. We could actually finish up our program here by having action. Here we can take this and we can just do this and again, all three of these methods are outside of the main method. Okay, that's very important. Some of you, because I'm a mind reader, and I know some of you are going to try to write a new method inside of the main method, right? You're going to do this. You're going to go inside the main method and try to create a new one. You're going to say public static void, new method. And it's going to get all kinds of mad, and you're going to say, Mr. Star, I did the thing, and it doesn't do the thing, right? Make sure you're outside of that main method. Okay, we cannot create a method inside of a method. Methods cannot nest within each other, all right? And they're not like loops. They can't nest inside each other. All right, so we have fantasy. Let's do action. Okay, and then we can call those methods up here. So case 2 is fantasy, and case 3 is action. Perfect. So now we have a fully functioning program. We just need this menu here inside the main method actually works, and that would work for anything we want to build. It's just if we wanted to add more to this program, we would add more to these sci-fi, fantasy, and action methods. We can create entire stories inside of these methods, and then this menu that your user gets right in the beginning can, kind of give them a new experience every time. They can choose, do I want to play the sci-fi game, the fantasy game, or the action game? And then they can get their interactive story right here. So methods are really important. We want to make sure we're sectioning off our program into different methods because we can call these methods anytime we want. And this is a very, very, very important thing to understand. It's a very critical part of programming that you need to really get good at is creating methods and calling methods. And so next week we're going to expand this a little bit more. We're going to talk about return values. We're going to talk about arguments, adding arguments to a method so that we can do some stuff. But you'll see that next week. For now, just focus on practicing this. Create all kinds of cool stuff with your methods. And I will see you next week. Thank you for paying attention.